Hello, welcome back to the channel. For those of you that don't know, my name is Roy Riley. I'm a professional photographer based in the UK. I've been shooting the Canon R5 as my main camera for about the last 3 years and shooting Canon in general for probably the last 3 decades or something like that. Good Lord, it sounds really long when you say it like that. The jump for me from DSLR cameras to mirrorless was a bit of a tricky one. It took me a while. But now I'm fully committed to this camera. I've shot hundreds of successful assignments with it all across the UK and overseas, and I think this is a wonderful piece of photographic equipment. As of now, there is the Mark II available, but I'm not really looking at that at the moment. I'd rather work with what I've got and make the most of what I've got, and I still feel like there's a long way to go with the R5. I think this piece of equipment far exceeds what I can do, so why would I be kind of, making it more complicated for myself? You know that I'm going to get the Mark II at some point. When this thing starts to feel ravaged by age, then I'll probably get a Mark II, right? That's the way to do it in my view. Anyway, a few people have asked me to make a kind of setup and settings video walkthrough of all the different things that how I set up the R5, as I've done for some of my older DSLR cameras. I find that a bit challenging because this is a complicated beast. There are so many settings that I don't think any setup would ever be right for any two people. You have to sort of figure out what is right for you with this camera and customize it to your own personal setup and your own requirements. However, there are a few things that I have found kind of along the way that some settings, some custom settings, and a few other tips and tricks and add-ons and bits and pieces that have made my journey with the R5 significantly better, and I thought I'd share those with you. Now, these won't be for everybody, but I hope that there's something in here for everybody, and if there is, then thank me later, because these things are hard won through challenging on assignment photography where things have gone wrong, or I found something particularly annoying about the R5 and then I found a solution to it. And so I hope there's something here for everybody. Let's jump on in. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is these little lumps that I've stuck onto my lens caps and all of my lenses. Now, I've been building a little bit of a collection of RF lenses. I've got some L lenses, I've got some non-L lenses. And one thing that they all seem to share in common is that they are quite bland from a design perspective. There's not much to tell you which way round the lenses. Yes, there's a few controls on some of them, and yes, there's some wording on some of them, but when you pick them up in the dark, it's really difficult. And when you're changing lenses often, like I tend to, often in dark environments, it has been really difficult to actually be able to find the point of the red dot that you need to line the lens up with the camera body or the lens cap. And previously, all of the EF lenses, I don't know if I've got any knocking around here to show you, don't think I have, had a red dot, the red dot. And the red dot was great on the EF lenses because you could feel it with your hand, or it was kind of luminous as well in the dark, or it just was sort of identifiable as the point with which you needed to line up the camera, the lens with the camera. It's sadly missing on all of the RF lenses. There is this little sort of dash, call it a dash, call it what you like, little bit of red-orange colouring, but it's smaller and less significant to see. And I certainly found that a real challenge. Particularly when you've got nice new glass, nice new lenses that you've invested in and nice new equipment, and then in the dark you're sort of scrabbling around, sort of getting it half on in the wrong angle, in a hurry, and it's not on the camera and you can feel it kind of graunching. It's horrible. So I discovered these little luminous dots. I bought them off of Amazon for not a great deal of money. If I can work out how to do it, I will leave a link to any of the things that I'm going to talk about. I'll leave a link to either the same product or a similar product. And if you buy it, I will, in theory, receive some kind of reward, money back from Amazon, which will help support the channel. So that'd be very, very cool. I will believe that when I see it. You never know. But these things have been very successful. I've put them on, they've all been on these different lenses and lens caps for a while now, and I have not lost one. I always thought they would fall off. They've got 3M VHB or something, sticky stuff, which is quite good in my experience. I thought they'd fall off. None of them have yet. You just have to sort of find a way of getting them into the right place, or roughly the right place. It doesn't have to be exact. It's just so that you kind of have a marker. Now, I'm sure there'll be some sort of smart 22-year-old kind of photographer that's very cool, that's kind of going, oh, I don't need that. He's got the eyesight of a golden eagle and can change these things without you know, any hesitation. But for me, as an old photographer with, you know, various different eye problems and, you know, being a bit stuck in the past and sort of having muscle memory for the old EF lenses, this thing has been an absolute game changer for me. Thank me later for this one, because, you know, you will feel, if you do this and you apply these to all of your lenses, you will multiple times over the next kind of few months, you will kind of go, oh, you know, that was actually quite a handy tip. It's one of those that will work for you. If it's not for you, then, you know, let's just move on. Let's just move on to the next thing. So not only is this thing an incredible stills camera, it's also an amazing video camera. And I'm sure you already know that, but it has one major problem, and that is that there is no dedicated switch to go between stills and video. And if you're like me, and I often mainly shoot stills for my clients, but sometimes I need to do video as well, and that means I'll be flipping between the two quite quickly. And I could not ever work out how to do it. There was ways of doing it, but there was no obvious simple switch. And you had to kind of go in to hold one button and do something different. I can't even remember how you were supposed to do it, sort of factory settings. But for this old man, I found it a bit challenging. So I have used my MFN button, a button which is on the top of nearly all of my Canon cameras. I don't think I've ever found actually anything useful for I don't think I ever use them for anything. I have set that MFN button to flip the camera between stills and video. And I won't tell you how you do it. It's in the custom settings. You can figure it out for yourself. Customized buttons, I think. That has been an absolute game changer for me over the last couple of years. Because even this weekend, I was shooting something where I needed to go from stills to video really quickly. And it's really easy to find this button, bizarrely. Some of the buttons aren't that easy to find in difficult lighting circumstances, but this one, if you can find the shutter, you can find your MFN button, and that's kind of really cool. And every time that I use it, I'm grateful to myself for having spent the time to figure that one out. I'm sure there'll be another young photographer going, yo, dude, you just do it like it says in the manual, dude. You know, and they'll probably be right. There probably is another way, but for me, this has been a game changer, and I hope that it might help somebody else out as well. So, you know, onwards we go. So I'm one of those photographers that likes to use off-camera flash, ever such a lot, typically mixed with available light. Now, I found a few problems when using the R5 with that, because I like to use the EVF in exposure simulation mode, which means that when I make a change to my exposure settings, I can see it through the viewfinder, so I get good exposure. And that made a lot of sense to me to do it like that. However, when you stick a flash gun or a trigger onto the top of the R5 onto the hot shoe, it effectively sort of puts the camera automatically into dumb mode, because it suddenly kind of goes, oh, you're using flash, therefore we're just going to show you what you want to see so you can actually see through the EVF, and then we let the flash do the business, right? Which under some circumstances is the right thing to do if you're working in a studio and it's dark, or you know, you need to be able to see, right? So there is a time for using it like that. However, when you're using it when you're using flash to shoot an available light picture, it's really nice to be able to see how your exposure settings are affecting the exposure through the viewfinder. This frustrated the hell out of me. I don't know if this particular tip works with all triggers or all cameras, by the way, but it certainly works with Godox, and it certainly works with the R5. I found this old lead, because I figured out that this thing has a PC socket on the side, and the PC socket is how we used to fire flashes in the studio years ago. I have this old lead with a hot shoe and a PC socket lead on it. Now, I don't know if they make these anymore, but I will see if I can find a similar product, and again, leave a link to it on Amazon on the description. I can already hear those young photographers going, just put it in TTL, dude, don't worry about it. You know, and maybe they're right, but for me, I like to understand what I'm doing in my photography, and this particular trick kind of has worked really well for me. So what I do is I plug this thing into the PC socket on the side of the R5, and then that means that when you take a picture, the camera will still send a little signal to the PC socket to fire the flash. By the way, this dumbs it down. You can't use TTL, you can't use high-speed flash, all of that stuff. It's just manual only, right? You then plug your trigger into the little hot shoe on here. And then what that means is that when you fire the camera, the flash will fire. Let's see. I hope you're picking that up. It's very simple. It's all manual. But that means that you can, the camera still, it's kind of tricked the camera into thinking it isn't firing a flash. So it still retains the exposure simulation through the viewfinder. So to give you an example of how this works, if you were trying to photograph somebody in a street scene in the evening on a telephoto lens, and you want to pick up the street lights behind the person, but you want to balance the flash with the available light, this will enable you to monitor what the available light is doing, so to adjust your settings, and then you can adjust your flash accordingly using the settings on either the back of the flash or the trigger, and you can balance those exposures out, and it all kind of just makes a bit more sense. Now this to me, as a dinosaur, was a bit of a game changer, and I've been using it ever since. There are times not to use it if you need high-speed sync or the TTL options, but for what I do, it works perfectly like this. And it took me a while to work this out, and this is actually one of my favorite tips for the R5. I haven't heard anybody else talking about it. If this is for you, then like I said, thank me later, because I think if this is for you, then you will find that your environmental portraits take on a whole new level of ease with the R5. Let's move on. Okay, so the last two things that I want to talk about are two particular custom settings that have really changed this camera for me. The first is about talking about the zoom crop mode thing that this thing has. This camera has got a massive sensor, and it has the option to, in the settings, to do an automatic crop to 1.6, like having a 1.6 teleconverter, but it's a digital crop. It shows you what that looks like through the viewfinder, and it reduces the resolution, obviously, because you're kind of pulling out the bit from the middle of the sensor. Lots of people have talked about it. Some people hate it, some people like it. I personally like it because under some circumstances it's enabled me to shoot pictures and get them out quickly to clients without doing too much post-production. And it just kind of gives a certain level of functionality to the camera that I personally like using, and I've found had a lot of success with it. A lot of people don't. Wildlife photographers don't like it because they'd rather have the real estate, so that for example, a bird enters the frame, they'd rather be able to crop later in post-production. But for me, it's worked quite well. What I did, but it was difficult to get to. Again, a complicated menu setup. Actually, to be fair, the zoom thing isn't that complicated. It's just on the red camera setting in the menu. But under the circumstances that I found myself in when I wanted zoom option, the crop option, I didn't really feel like I had time to go into the menu to change it back and forth. And quite often you'll be flipping between the two. I'll give you a classic example of when I used it. I was in Greece photographing wildfires a while ago, and I was restricted with the lenses that I had. Didn't have a long telephoto lens, which was really annoying. I was there for a different purpose. I did not have that. I needed, a big lens, did not have it. But I did have a standard zoom. I had a 100mm, I think, something like that. I think maybe I just had this, the 105 on the 24 to 105. Photographing on the hills with the 105 just felt like I was a million miles away. And yet to be able to put the crop mode on and turn it into a 170mm, I guess, something like that, 160, 170, it just made me feel like I was actually able to get the pictures that I needed, put it that way. And then I was still having to crop them, but they were for the media, so it didn't need to be sort of super resolution, and it worked really well under those circumstances. Now, I have assigned to cut a long story short, I'm waffling on again, I've assigned my depth of field button here to flip between to bring that crop option up. And again, you will find it in the custom settings of buttons, and that has been, again, a bit of a game changer for me, who shoots all sorts of different things. It's not perfect for everybody, but that's one of the custom settings that I find myself using on a weekly basis, certainly not daily, and has been very useful for me. The next custom setting that I want to talk about is autofocus. Now, this thing is a beast with the eye focusing. I'm sure you already know, or you've already read enough other stuff about that. And another contentious issue, I'm a back button focuser, other people aren't. I use this thing in AI servo nearly all of the time. I don't go near one shot anymore, which is a big change for me, but that's just how I find this particular camera to work the best. Now, I'm a back button focuser that uses AI servo for nearly everything, and I like to use eye focus probably 75% of the time, but eye focus can be a problem 25% of the time when you just need to tell it where you want the focus to be. Now, flipping between those different modes in, on a busy shoot is just unrealistic. So what I have done, and again, I won't show you how I do it, I'll just tell you what I'm doing, you can figure it out for yourself. The back buttons I have assigned to different things. And basically the AF on button that I have that you see here, which is the kind of obvious place for your thumb, I have that set to eye focus. The one next to it I have set to just normal focus. And then as a third option, I have my screen enabled so that if I need to, I can flip it around, and wherever I put my finger on the screen, I will find the focusing spot, or I can use the little toggle here to select the focusing if I need to. That way I have every option available to me under every circumstance. So I can eye focus if that works, I can not eye focus if that's the right thing to do, and I can use either the joystick or the screen to toggle through the different focusing spots, so I can always have the right focusing option that I need for any given circumstance. And that has been amazing, and I think that that's the best way of coping with all the different focusing circumstances that certainly my varied assignments give me. It is different on some other cameras. I'm using the R8, which is filming this right now, and that has a slightly different focusing system, and I've got a different way of working with that camera, which is very unusual for me because I normally stick to the same thing. But with these things, they are highly customizable, and hopefully some of these settings have been of use to you. Please do subscribe and like, and let me know your thoughts, but just keep the comments nice. I don't like nasty comments. So, there's enough trouble in the world without the photography community eating itself in negativity and darkness. I wish you all very well, and look forward to seeing you on the next video. Goodbye.